Germany has recorded more than 50,000 coronavirus deaths since the start of the pandemic. That number has risen sharply over recent weeks, even as infection figures are finally declining. Hundreds of deaths, sometimes more than 1,000, have been reported daily across Germany over recent weeks. In some parts of the country, intensive care units and crematoriums have reached their limit. The situation has prompted the German government to once again extend the country's lockdown. Germany's health minister Jens Spahn has been giving an update alongside health officials. He says the coronavirus case numbers are encouraging, but still too high.
The vaccination program is giving us hope in the current situation. The crisis is at its peak, but we are beginning to leave the pandemic behind us. I know that many feel that this is not happening quickly enough. I would also like to have more vaccine doses available so that more people can be immunized.
Let's bring in our correspondent, Jared Reed, who's following the latest on this story for us. Hi, Jared. We mentioned that grim number, 50,000 deaths here in Germany. Bring us up to speed on the situation.
That's right, Sumi. Very sadly, over 50,000 people have now died from or of COVID-19 in Germany. There have been around 2.1 million cases so far, but there is encouraging news insofar as that infection rates are on a steady decline. As they stand today, the infection rate is 115 per 100,000 of population over a 7-day period. As I say, that number has been steadily declining, but not fast enough, which is why the government and the states agreed earlier this week to extend current restrictions until February the 14th. This continues to shut down large parts of public life, like schools and daycares, shops as well, and they are encouraging more medical mask wearing, and there is going to be an obligation on employers to make sure that more of their employees work from home so that the infection risk in offices is reduced, and also on public transport. The big worry at the moment is these mutations that are starting to be seen in Germany. There have been isolated cases of them, and health authorities really don't want these mutations to become dominant here.
Well, those health authorities have been speaking to journalists today. Tell us more about what they've been saying.
That's right. We've just been hearing from Lothar Wieler, who's the head of the Robert Koch Institute, which is Germany's infectious diseases body. He has been saying that there are 16,000 nursing homes in Germany, and currently of those 16,000, 900 are experiencing quite serious COVID-19 outbreaks. And he's saying the ones that are doing better are the ones that have the resources and expertise to manage the situation. And he hopes that those that aren't managing it so well will get the resources like staffing that they need. He's saying that people over 80 continue to be a significant risk group here in Germany too.
And Jared, how are Germans taking all of this, the extended restrictions?
Largely, they're supportive. A recent polling shows that around 40% of people surveyed here in Germany were for significant hardening of restrictions. Around 20% wanted them to stay as they are. But by and large, consistently over the last few months, we've seen that public support for restrictions here has been consistently high.
Our political correspondent, Jared Reed, thank you. Now, the number of new cases in England has dropped from a peak of nearly 70,000 per day in the first week of January to just under 40,000 on Thursday. But the UK has recorded more deaths per capita than any other country in the world, and the number continues to rise. Hospitals up and down the country are being stretched to their limits. And we want to warn our viewers, you might find some of these images disturbing.
This woman in her mid-20s is fighting for survival. Intensive care units have reached their limit. The doctors are volunteers from other units of this London hospital. They breathe a sigh of relief. The patient is stable for now.
She's young. She's someone's relative. This is something precious that we're holding and we're trying to do. Yeah, it's quite frightening.
12 of the hospital's 15 floors are filled with corona patients. Doctors try desperately to find beds for new admissions.
Just bring the back of the bed, see if that helps. He's got COVID and he's had a stroke.
One bed has become available. Up until an hour ago, Hannah Freeborn lay in it. She was a mother, a grandmother, and just 64.
I wouldn't wish this on anybody. This really is horrible. It's real.
The corona mutation from the south of England is clearly more contagious. A strict lockdown since the start of January has done little to reduce the number of new infections.
We've got to observe the lockdown, the stay-at-home message. That's absolutely crucial in what is unquestionably going to be a tough few weeks ahead.
The flood of patients is not expected to ease, and the death toll remains high, the result of a coronavirus mutation that is out of control.
Let's go to London now. Our correspondent Birgit Maas is standing by for us there. Hi, Birgit. How bad is the situation right now in the UK?
It's pretty bad. Almost 100,000 people have died because of the virus. And as it was explained in the report, many hospitals don't know where to put the patients. They're really running out of beds. And the problem is the new variant of the coronavirus, which is quite prevalent in London and the southeast, but it has also been traveling across the country. And this new strain is very difficult for the authorities to get under control. And people that I know that are vulnerable are quite frightened. I have one friend who was always very pragmatic. She's vulnerable, but now she's really shielding completely. So people are taking this very, very seriously.
And the government, the environment minister now says that the government is considering a full closure of borders. What can you tell us about that?
This is something that's being debated in the UK. I think the context is actually when the situation gets better in the UK, but we know that other countries across the world might be still struggling with new variants. So in the UK, what has been successful is the vaccination program. Over 7% of the population have now received at least one dose of one of the vaccines. So that is, in the international comparison, is really quite high, particularly in the European context. And now the government are thinking of how to protect their own country. So once the UK has gotten this virus better under control, but in other countries there might be new variants, how can they protect the UK? So it's being discussed possibly to have government accommodation for travellers that are coming into the UK, or electronic tagging, or more closing of the borders and tougher border restrictions. So all this is being debated at the moment.
And Birgit, you said the situation is pretty bad. The virus is spreading. Hospitals are overwhelmed. How are people in London coping right now?
Well, people are definitely scared. So when I walk through the streets of London, the streets are pretty empty. You don't see a lot of people congregating, and most people know other people who have had COVID. Obviously, a lot of people have it, and then they get better. But some people know people who have died. So it is very real. It's a very real threat. Now there is light at the end of the tunnel with a vaccination. So I think people are just hoping for the best, that within a few months really that the situation will be better. But definitely the next weeks are going to be tough because the hospitals are so overwhelmed, and that is not going to change anytime soon.
Birgit Maas for us in London. Thank you. The rate of new infections in Israel remains high as the country battles a third wave of infections. But at the same time, Israel is vaccinating people faster than anywhere else. The government says all Israeli citizens will be inoculated by the end of March. Israel was able to move fast after securing a special but also controversial deal with vaccine manufacturer BioNTech Pfizer.
This basketball stadium in Tel Aviv is now a vaccination center. People under the age of 35 are already being immunized here. while older residents are getting their second jab. The vaccines are being administered in record time. BioNTech Pfizer is delivering millions of doses. In return, the pharma companies are receiving valuable data that allows them to measure the efficacy of their product. I don't have a problem with the data agreement, and I don't feel like I'm part of an experiment. We're leading the world on vaccinations, and Israel offers the right kind of infrastructure. It's Israel's healthcare system with its universal insurance that makes the country so interesting to BioNTech Pfizer. Insurance companies allocate doctors to patients, streamlining the vaccination program. The digitalized and centralized nature of data collection has created a treasure trove of readily available information.
If one wants to understand how a real-world rollout of a vaccine program impacts public health, then Israel, with its digital health repositories and its very strong methodological capabilities and its very good outreach of public health and clinical health to all of the citizens, is probably an ideal place to do that.
The main objective is to find out at what stage the vaccination drive achieves herd immunity and to figure out ways to get there fast. The data used in the research has been made anonymous. But that hasn't stopped critics from sounding the alarm.
People are saying, what's the problem with anonymized data? And the problem is that anonymized data, medical data today, can be transferred to be non-anonymized if you have the right tools and the right technology. We want to have a kind of an oversight experts that will make sure that this data is not going to be exploited later by third parties.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has emphasized that the findings will benefit the rest of the world. But his prime focus is the impact that the vaccination program is having in Israel itself. We will be the first country to defeat the pandemic. The deal I have struck with Pfizer allows us to vaccinate everyone above 16 by the end of March. The ambitious target coincides with parliamentary elections, which Netanyahu is hoping to win. But while the number of vaccinations are shooting up, so too are infections, a race against time that Israel is determined to win.